So, are we streaming? Says I'm live. Oh, there we go. Alright. Starting off this video well. So, hey everyone, this is GeoWill from Man Productions², and we are back to continue our live stream plugin creation craziness that I've been doing recently. So, last time we left off, I had done a bunch of stuff, and we had gotten to the point to where we were at, we'd gotten all this done, basically, and I was starting to work on this other stuff. So, thanks away. Okay. So, what I've been doing the past, I think it's been 2 days since I did the last one, was putting in the new stuff for restricted and replace. So it's kind of a refresher on what these are supposed to do. An armor or weapon that's equipped that has a restricted attribute on the restrictions note tags basically will only allow you to change to any class you already know, and that class specifically. So those are the two conditions that the restricted tag imposes. If you don't have a restricted attribute on the tag note tag for that class, then what will happen is that the armor or weapon or armor plural and weapons will just be a regular requirement. Now for replace, it's a little bit different. For replace, you don't actually see the armor or the weapon in the requirements tab unless you have it equipped. So what this does is it essentially says, okay, there's this class, it has some requirements, but if you have this item and you have it equipped, so if you have this armor or weapon and it's equipped, you can bypass those requirements and just go right and be able to change right to the class right away. So that means that with that equipped, with the item with their place tag equipped, any other requirements are ignored basically, except for gender. Gender is still respected in both of these cases, restricted and replace. But the other ones are ignored for replace. What other notes? Let's see. So let me just kind of go. This is kind of an interesting kind of insight into how I do really complicated BS like this, where I have to like kind of destroy my brain in order to figure it out. But so I was trying to figure out how to do this restricted thing, because I mean it's kind of crazy how it works, and I'll get to show you the code here in a second, which has become so frigging just I don't know. I have no clue how I'm gonna refactor it now, because it's just so messed up. Not really messed up, but it's neededly complex, not needlessly, but it's required complexity because of this crap, and it's just annoying. Anyway, so the idea was, okay, we have this restricted tag, and if a piece of equipment, an armor or weapons is equipped that has that tag, then, and it's the class has that restricted tag for that armor or weapon, then that class should should close all the other classes to you, unless you already have bin them, and 2, only allow you to change to that class and those other classes. Then the third thing is, though, you have to consider is that, okay, let's say we have a bunch of different classes that we're using this with a bunch of different equipment. And we happen to have a piece of equipment equipped from those classes in all 4 slots. Now, I say 4 because you can only have maximum 4 equipment. You can either have 2 weapons, a headgear, and some armor, or you can have a weapon, a shield, armor, and a headgear. So you can only have 4 equipment maximum. So that means you can have up to 4 restricted classes maximum. So I had to think about how to handle that. So the best way I could think of was to say, okay, let's say we have this one class. Loadout would be, we have a loadout which has weapons that have a bunch of classes that are tied to them, basically. So the sword is tied to a fighter, shield's tied to knight, helm is a ranger, and the breastplate's tied to a lord knight. So this object array, whatever you want to call it, that I've created called restricted class list will then have a key of the class ID. Inside of the value, though, we're going to have another object array. And it's going to be weapons or armor, or weapons and armor, depending on what's going on with it, as you'll see down here. And then inside of that, we'll have a key that's a list, an array of weapon IDs, or armor IDs. So in this case here, we have the sword fighter. The sword's ID is 1s, and it's in the weapon since it's a weapon. We have the shields, part of armor, ID is 1. Helm, which is for the ranger. So ranger ID, armor ID 4. And then the lord knight ID, armor ID 10. And then the way we would access that is then we'd have the class, we'd have the list, restricted class list, we'd have the class ID, and then we'd pull out the weapons or the armor ID array using this or armor. Now let's consider this one. So in this one we have a sword and a shield that are both tied to the fighter class, helm is a ranger, and the breastplate is a lord knight. In this case you'll have the exact same setup as this, except for the fighter ID, you have a weapons key value pair and an armor key value pair. So in this case we have 2 conditions here to check, and we still have the normal ones there. Ignore this because this has all been fixed, and it was actually really simple to fix this stuff, even though I thought it was going to be crazy hard to fix it. It was just like a improper condition on 2 if statements to fix both these issues. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have to go through this code, pull it apart, reprogram it, and take a day to fix it, and it like took 2 minutes. So this is kind of what I was like, had to go through. I couldn't, a lot of times when I'm thinking or when I'm dealing with a really complicated issue, I just can't talk or think myself around it enough to figure out how it should look. So I do something like this, where I list down, okay, what do we need to do? What are the things to consider? And then type out an example, and then an example of what that example should produce with the code, the pseudocode or the pseudo logic that I have up above in the requirements says. So that's what all this is. Now let's talk about the code. The code is a little bit insane, because the idea is a little bit insane. Actually, just do that. First of all, this is the old code that I then replaced because I decided to go a different way with the required weapons and required armor. They're no longer, since we're going to create an object kind of thing, I figured, okay, I'll make those object array too. I could just object list, whatever you want to call those things, and then we can just use regular, easier ways of dealing with them that way, as you can see. So we have our, pretty much everything is the same, except we have some extra calls here and there to deal with some problems and some other issues that popped up because of where the stuff's being called at and how it was being called. Like for example, what was happening at first was that I was calling this in here, and because of that, it wasn't actually working correctly. It was working on every class instead of the specific class it's supposed to work for. Or rather, it wasn't loading all the classes, it was loading them over and over and over again. So you get the same one, and it wasn't working properly, basically. So I had to move it outside of this to fill it first with everything, and then we'd check over it in this thing every time because it's the only way to make it work that I've found so far that made any sense when I was working on it. So we're going through this thing. Well, I guess I'll show you that code first. It's down here in this new thing here. So what we're doing now is not that one, this one. I think it's this one. It's not that one. Where are you? This, okay. So we have our var rex because we just want to get it ourselves and not pass it through. Basically do it fresh in here. Then we want to we have a temporary array 1 and 2, each for the 2 types of things we're dealing with, so weapons and armor. Then the temp object, which is then assigned to the restricted class list. So then we're going through basically what we're doing up here with this which is why I was trying to do it in here, because we had to do something similar to this. Didn't want to do it again. I wanted to do it in this, but it wouldn't work in this because of the way it's supposed to work, or the way I decided to make it work. So we're basically doing this twice now, which is bloody annoying, but it's how it works now. Going through it, we're checking to make sure that Rex actually has a length, and if it does, then we are doing another one of these deals like we are up here. Just checking weapons and armor, though. So the first thing we're checking for is restricted. Well, we're just checking restricted because that's all we care about here. Up here, we're checking for... I guess actually it's not here. But I'll get into what I changed up here in a bit. But we're checking for this new restricted tag, which is part of the armor requirement tag now, or weapon requirement tag. So how this now works is up here, so I changed this too a bit, is that we're actually building out more of a key value pair kind of thing with weapons and armor based on what we have here. So, for example, since we're only expecting there to be at most 4 tag parts, I guess you can say, 4 attributes for our weapon or armor tag note tag. Either we're expecting the weapon part, or expecting the ID, then we're expecting either restricted, or we're expecting replace, or we're expecting restricted and replace. But to be honest, well, no, yeah, because of course the question that, well, that might actually break it if you do both at once, because if you do replace then skips the class part. So I guess you couldn't really do replace and restricted at the same time. So maybe we could take the second one off of here, because this will never work the way that you might think it will if you use both. It'll just default to replace because that's checked first in the code down below. But we're doing that for armor and for weapons. So back down here. Oh wow, I managed to stop at the right place. Almost. So back down here, we're going through, we're checking all this stuff out. We're seeing if there's a restricted tag and if it's set to true. If it exists, it'll be true, but we just need to check that anyway because, stuff can happen, and it's better to be more defensive than not be defensive and have something explode because you didn't add one check that's easy to add and doesn't really cost that much in terms of processing power. And then we just push that in to the temp object, or rather to the temporary 1 or 2, depending on what we're looking at. And we're just pushing in the ID specifically. So we're using armor ID or weapon ID. Then after that's done, if the temporary 1 or temporary 2 have elements, we're pushing those into the restricted class list class ID. The reason we're doing this is because we want to push in the weapons object and an empty array key, so that we can just populate the key like this. I found it was easier than doing whatever I was doing before, like creating an empty object and then empty object with like the key to whatever, then setting that to the whatever the object I wanted to use was later on. This is just a little bit faster. One less line of code. So then once that's done, we go through the regular stuff, and everything else pretty much executes the same until we get down to this. As you can see, we have a lot more checks here. Not a lot more checks, but we have more checks, and this is something I thought about. Literally, I was awake at night. I couldn't go to sleep because I was thinking about this damn thing. After I finished the last stream, thinking about, well, if we're doing this, and we're just using that one check, the original check, the bcan player class change or whatever it is check, it won't really work because then it'll be set to true or false depending on what things are going on, and if gender is true and weapons not or whatever, it would get reset and turn to false, and all kinds of like crazy scenarios were flying through my mind, and I just couldn't get to sleep. So I came back over and worked on this little change. But what I did was I created new checks for each of the types. So there's a class check, there's an armor check, there's a weapon check, there's a gender check. And in each section, we're setting that to true or false. And then once we're done with all of that, we're checking all those down here. And if everything is passed, then we're saying true, and if not, false. Now, when doing this, though, we also have to be mindful, like, if there's no item requirements, we have to set the item check to true, otherwise it won't work. And that's what these are for here. The other ones we have are this weapon armor class override. So this is if there's a replace tag. And then there's, where's the other one? B class is restricted. This is if there's a restriction tag, or what restricted tag. So what'll happen is it'll go through these and it'll see if there's a replace tag. Now if the replace tag exists, it'll set this to true, weapon armor class override. And so what if we have the armor but not the weapon, or the weapon and not the armor? Because you can still, with the replacement tag, you can have multiple items equipped that have that replacement tag. And they'll be part of the requirements. So like say you have a class that requires you to have a specific shield and a specific sword, for example. So if we have this, it'll go through this, it'll turn it to false, and it'll do the regular. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, that'll work that way. I haven't tested all the scenarios, but when I was testing it for some of them, I figured that the way it was working, it would work for everything that I wanted it to work for. So I think that'll work that way. We'll check it out. But what it does, it checks for replace. If true, it sets this to true. Now, the only thing that changes is how the rest of this code executes. So if we skip the class processing. So if it's true, then we're just going to set the class check to true, and we're going to set item check to pass, because the item and class will be overridden by this thing. If it's equipped, if that weapon is equipped. Okay. Let's make sure that we're setting this to false down here. So we're setting it to true here, and then it's false down here. We need to reset this to false, otherwise it'll cause a problem. Actually, both of them. We need to reset them both to false. Whoops. What did I do? I hit X instead of C. So, if equipped, else. So the else if equipped. If this is true. Web check passed is true, but we need to set these to false. That wouldn't really be a case of where we need to change them here. It would be in armor specifically, but I'm going to do them here too because, again, defensive programming is for the win most of the time. And then this. So we're just saying that if we have a weapon that has replace on it and we have it equipped, and it changes these two to true. And then we come down here to weapon, and we see, okay, we have a weapon that has replace, or the current class has a required armor that has a replace tag, but we don't have it equipped. So we have the weapon equipped, but not the armor. So what'll happen is that we'll turn this to false. Before we would turn this to false, set armor check to true, and then it would automatically, well, it wouldn't automatically do it. I mean, it might automatically go through and say, okay, redo these, change them to false down below, but I'd rather change them to false here because it just makes more sense. If they're changed to true when you have it equipped, they should be changed to false when you don't have it equipped, even if code later on would change them to false anyway if you didn't have those. Again, it's just a way to kind of protect against weirdness going on. Trust me, I've seen all kinds of weirdness going on with code before, so maybe we won't need that when I go back there and refactor it, but for now I'm going to put it in. Alright. No, I don't want to purchase. So now, database. What I'm going to do is we're going to have this replace. We'll leave it like this, and then we'll do a weapon as well to check that. So I have these different classes here. I've added the restricted tag to the dancer class for weapon 28. And there's also an armor with no restricted tag. Then we have this super ultimate class, which has got all this stuff and has essentially double weapon, double armor set up for requirements for testing that. Then we have this, which is basically 5 classes that are testing the restricted. So this is like what I was telling you about testing for the maximum number of classes you could have restricted at once. So we have 2 weapons, a shield, and 2 pieces of armor, headgear and body armor. And so that'll test that. And then we have the one to replace here, and we'll test this for armor, and then we'll test it with weapon and armor, having the armor equipped and the weapon not equipped, or weapon equipped, armor not equipped. And we'll see how that all works. Okay, we'll save this and start. Alright. So first off, let's go ahead and take a look at what we have here. So currently, Felto can change to all the stuff he should be able to change to. He's currently a mage, so he can turn back to novice. We have novice 20 and mage 31, so we can do all the starting classes, well, tier 1 classes and the wizard tier 2 class. And then we have the other classes down here, which are all locked off. So as you can see, this is the super ultimate class. Has all the different requirements there. Now if we take a look at replace, it'll just say the class that you need, because technically what's happening with replacement is that the weapons and armor that have a replace tag are essentially saying, okay, if you have this, you can become this class even if you don't meet the other requirements. You're replacing the existing requirements with the equipment that you have equipped. And these are just the tests for the restricted classes. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to test the restricted classes. I'm just going to go and equip Felto with everything. So, well, not everything. We'll do test 1. Actually, test. Okay, they actually changed them both to dual wield. That's why. Let me fix that. I knew there was a reason I didn't change the second one to dual wield, but then I decided, okay, we'll do it anyway. No, weapon. Test 2, not dual wield. Alright. Because we have to have one that's not dual wield, so we can also test with the shield. If you equip test 1, it automatically allows you to equip test 2, but test 2 will just allow you to equip a shield, not another weapon. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Let's grab that stuff again. So equip. So if I equip test 1, this becomes a weapon slot, and I can just do this. Now, if I equip test 2, it's still a shield, so we can still do that. So that's what we'll do. We'll do this one first. Test 3, test 5, and test 4. Alright, so now if I go talk to this person, I should have access to every test restricted class except for the first one. So now you can see all these other classes are not, can't change them anymore because they've been locked off by the restricted equipment that we have equipped. And now we have access to all these restricted classes, except for restricted class 1. Of course, I do have to fix. That's right. There's one problem. For whatever reason, this isn't being cleared when we're doing a restricted class. So I'll need to check that. And the movement of the items isn't changing. I forgot about that. If I change to this class, I can still change to the other classes, and I can change back to the class that I was, mage and novice. I just can't change to anything new. So I can't change to a class I should be able to change to, like wizard, because it's closed off from that one. And here you can see that issue I was talking about. The other issue besides this not being displayed correctly. And I can change to any of these classes. Now currently, if I take off that equipment, I'll still be able to change to the restricted classes because of how the system works. I'm not sure if I want to change it or not, because that's, again, some more complexity into what's already become super complex code. But if I wanted to, I could say, okay, unless you have these items equipped, you can't become these classes. So that'd be clear. And now all these classes are open again, including restricted class 2 and 5, since I already have them. So if I change back, if I change to wizard, for example, I can still change back to 5. Now let's say that I have that that weapon equipped. the one that's a dual wield weapon. Oh wait, that's right, I gotta change back to novice because it's all general armor. Or novice or mage or something. It's all general weapons and armor, so that's one thing. That's another thing. When you change to a restricted class, make sure the type of weapon you have that's those weapons are being restricted, or that are part of that class as a restricted weapon or armor, you're also able to wear them when you change to that restricted class. Otherwise, you'll be unequipped to that stuff and everything will be unlocked again. So, test 1, test 2, 5, and 4. So now I'll have access to test 1, but not test 2. No. Test 1, but not test 3? Whatever the shield one was. Yeah, so I don't have access to this one now, because I don't have the test 3 class. So it looks like if you can't access it, it works, but if you can change to it, it doesn't. The spacing. It's interesting. So now let's test this one. So let's go back to equipment, clear everything. Equip, suck weapon 1, suck weapon 2. And yes, the suck is intentional. That's why I call it super ultimate class. Alright, so we have all the equipment that are part of the requirements. And we have the mage level 20 and the novice level 10. So we can change to this class, but it's not pushing everything over. So that's another example. And then we also, though, have access to... Oh, that's because these are equipped. Right. Or we've changed these already, that's why. So that's an example of how you can use every armor to do something there. It actually will work that way, too. And finally, the replacement class. Let's go ahead and equip. Clear. That was a... what class? Can't remember which weapon it was. Armor 25. Test 6, okay. Oh, wait. I don't think I actually gave it. No. I had used test 5 before. I just created a new armor for it. Let's go ahead and have myself give it to myself. This is annoying. For whatever reason, Steam will just like interject into here. Okay, there we go. Sometimes. Alright, so now it should work. Or rather, it should give us what we need. So now this is going to be an example of how that when we equip that armor, even though we don't have Brawler level 10, we'll be able to change to that class. If we have it equipped. Keep it there. If we don't have it equipped, then it'll still say Brawler 10, like it was showing earlier. But when we equip it, the Brawler level 10 requirement will vanish and it'll just show the test 6 item requirement. It's a shield. So now if we go check this, we can change to it now, because all we need is this. Now if I just come back and unequip it, and it's locked off again because we have to be Brawler level 10. That's an example of how the replace tag works. So yeah, that's all the stuff I've done over the last couple days. Actually a bit further than I thought it would be at this point. Really, all I have to do is figure out those few issues, and then it'll be ready to release, I guess. Well, let's go ahead and test, because I still haven't tested it yet. The item and gold costs. I don't know if I've broken that stuff yet. So let's in real time see if I've totally fracked that stuff up or not. Let's go ahead and turn this off. What is the... I think it's still potion. Not that one. I have it turned off to false here. Okay, we'll turn this to true. So, actually, these might actually break because... well, no, it's based on the levels that you currently have. So, no, it wouldn't. That's right. It's based on...